Hi, everyone. My name is Frenzy, and this is a presentation that I put together in an attempt to make us a little bit more effective at playing warriors within EverQuest. Before we get started, I'm just going to assume that the listener has some basic understanding of raid mechanics, and I'll try my best to explain things along the way, but explaining every detail of what's going on is probably going to make this video over an hour long, and I really hope it doesn't get to that length. I have zero skills with editing videos, nor do I really want to spend another attempt at recording this. As sort of a bit of a disclosure, is that this is my second attempt at recording this. I actually missed a few things the first time around and flubbed a couple of sections. So I'm just going to be blasting through these slides with like 25% less enthusiasm. I've spent a really long time on this presentation, which I'm sure you will all see pretty shortly. So before we jump into the presentation, this does exist written up as a warrior class resource document. It's posted within our Discord under class pins. I think Vidor pinned it in that channel. So if you are wanting to read a little bit more on some of the content of this, please feel free to look here. But this presentation was put together to kind of go over the larger points of the document, especially for those people that are allergic to reading. I think that this presentation should hopefully be helpful. So starting the game, obviously you have to pick the race. And a big question that we get frequently is what's the best race to play as a warrior, in case you're having regrets about your race or wanting to create an alt or just out of curiosity. The two races that come up the most frequently as sort of the best races to play warriors as is Ixars and Ogres. Ixars are really great tanks just because they have a higher innate AC bonus compared to the other races. It actually gets higher the more higher level you get. And I think that this was probably left over from when Ixars launched in Kunark. They weren't able to wear plate armor like Cobalt, and when Velias came out, everyone could wear everything as long as you were the right class, and that AC bonus is kind of carried forward. So Ixars have the highest AC of any race that can play warriors. Also, they have a higher innate HP regen. It's the same regen that is shared with trolls, which is nice. You know, it's not going to help you survive big fights, but you know, all the time in between fights and with soloing and small group content and just through the entire lifespan of your character, that HP regen really adds up to a incredible amount of quality of life improvement. So Ixars are amazing contenders for best warrior. In that same discussion, Ogres are also amazing as warrior tanks. The biggest besides having amazing stats, like look at the starting stats compared to everyone else. They have amazing stats, which is incredibly helpful leveling up. But the biggest thing that they have is something called frontal stun immunity, which means that if you are tanking something or something's attacking you, you will not get stunned. And I think I heard this metric a super long time ago. I don't know if it's true or not, but 5% of fights that are on unhasted mobs, like if you're tanking like a dragon in TOV or something, 5% of that fight you are going to be spent stunned. So with an ogre, you can translate that into 5% of the time you are actually swinging and generating more aggro compared to the other races who are stunned during that duration of time. So aggro generation on ogres actually might be slightly superior. But honestly, at the end of the day, whatever race you choose, it doesn't really matter what race, honestly. Like there's small nitpicks and small things that kind of put these slightly a cut above the rest, but you don't tank anything when you quit the game. So if you don't like the race, play a gnome, God forbid, or another race. Like even though their stats may not be as great, when you start gearing out your character, you're gonna max all your stats out, or at least the stats that matter. So pick the race that works best for you. They work nearly as well as these two races in some contexts, if not in all. In other situations, are just as good. Also, there's like really quirky benefits that some races get, like improved night vision, slam. We talked about regen, frontal stun immunity, but like gnomes, for example, get like a really cool like tinkering active ability, which is super fun on warriors. So take a look at them. Really, all races are great to play warriors. So the outline for this presentation is sort of divided into 5 parts, which we'll talk about gear first. Very, very, very important. As a warrior, I wanted to put this as the first part to kind of get out of the way first. Second is buffs, equally as important as gear, really. Clickies, we'll discuss some of the unique clickies that are specific to warriors. Part 4 is on questions to sort of ask ourselves on how to tank. This is sort of like the meat and potatoes of this presentation, so we'll spend quite a bit of time there. And then part 5 is just a desperate plea for warriors in our guild to be vocal and to communicate, and that enhances our raid's understanding of what's going on and if we need to alter it any way. So going into plunging right into part 1, which is gear. Your primary objectives as a warrior is to keep aggro and to stay alive. And honestly, the only exception to this is when you're not designated the main tank, obviously. But if you are tanking, you need to keep aggro, and we'll talk about how to do that, and stay alive, which this section is highly dedicated to. If you are not tanking, you as a warrior need to be ready to step up in case that main tank dies. And doing all of this successfully requires you to properly gear your character. The main concept of gearing a warrior is to get as much health as possible, or as much HP as humanly possible. Armor class or AC can help a little bit with damage mitigation. It's a little bit more pronounced in like solo, small group content. But when you were tanking like Redcon, dragons and giants and boss mobs across the world, the overall consensus is that HP is way, way, way more important than armor class. For most fights, it's not going to matter if you have 1300 AC or 1700 AC. The raid boss is still going to max hit you and basically ignore your armor class. So in this gearing journey, you want to prioritize HP items. So the way to kind of view yourself, if you're trying to think of like where am I in terms of like rankings of warriors in terms of health, because that's a sort of a surrogate marker to see how far along in your journey of gearing your character you are, is looking at how much HP you can get fully buffed. So beginner tank is 5 to 5.k HP, and this is where most people can land themselves after focusing their efforts on like maximizing their HP gear from like EC Tunnel, or maybe scooping up some pretty cheap no drop items along the way. Like if you as you're sort of learning the basics of being a tank, maybe it's your first foray into TOV, and you can scoop some very, very cheap no drop items, like stuff that's like 1 to 10 DKP, and that can get you pretty fairly prepared to tank a lot of stuff. And at this point, your gear is to get to that. Your goal is to get to the 6K club, which is intermediate tank. So intermediate tank, 6,000 HP. At this point, you can tank pretty much anything in Norath. Keep learning the encounters, keep accumulating more HP. You're probably not going to be the first tank for AOW or like Viam or Tunair or something, but you are pretty much able to tank it. I think the first time I successfully tanked AOW, I had 5.8k HP. Back in Paradigm Shift. So you can certainly tank things, but maybe you're not the best choice. You really want to advance yourself towards this advanced tank area, which is 6.5k HP. You can pretty much tank anything very comfortably. And you're now invited to our very exclusive Warrior rooftop pool and bar. So congrats on that. You want to keep obtaining and accruing gear, though, and making your way towards BIS tank. So BIS stands for best in slot. This depends on your buffs, but 6.8k to 7k, I think the max HP is, I should have looked this up, but I think it's 7,030 HP. I mean, at this point, when you obtain this, you've pretty much beaten EverQuest. So, go outside and enjoy the outside air. But you've obviously spent a lot of DKP on your character. You can take really anything in the game. So congrats. It's very important to take shortcuts early on and get items that are going to improve your HP significantly right now, rather than saving up for a very expensive armor piece. I know a lot of tanks will go to the wiki and or ask or inspect BIS tanks and see what gear that they have, and they just like beeline straight to those items. That's not the best strategy, honestly. If you're a warrior in that beginner or intermediate category and you're saving up for that 4K DKP item for Vulag, you're going to have a really bad time. Not only are you going to be waiting for a very long time to accrue that much DKP, but you're going to be doing it all with suboptimal HP gear. And in this situation, it's better to just purchase a bunch of cheaper HP gear that still advances your health along the way and save that BIS gear for later. Haste is also very important. Item haste, specific. I mean, obviously spell haste and item haste, but item haste is very important in this game, and sometimes it is necessary to sacrifice a little bit of health in order to get an item with haste, and this is typically a belt or a cloak. Warriors must have haste in raids. That's a requirement. Since white damage hits and misses contribute significantly to the amount of aggro that you generate. So in other words, that extra HP that you're going to miss out on by taking off your Hierophant Cloak and swapping it with the Cloak of Flames, that 25 HP that you're missing out on isn't going to matter at all if you can't even hold the target's aggro, because you're not generating enough aggro from your white damage hits and misses. So please get that haste. Bit of a forewarning as we kind of get into some of the nitty gritty with these different items that are recommended for different slots, is that it's quite expensive to gear a warrior. So yeah, ask all the monks in the guild. Warriors are incredibly expensive to gear out. I hope you enjoy the long scenic route to fully gear out your character. These are some specifics on items that are recommended to be shooting for wherever you are in your HP hoarding journey. So the way this table is broken down, columns, so slot, left-hand side, good items, good to kind of scoop up with either plat or very, very low DKP items. And then the great items are sort of like the BIS, or like what you'd see like the best warriors in the guild really rocking on their character. So we'll go slot by slot, and we'll just kind of talk briefly about this. So in terms of ear slots, hammered golden loops are amazing. These are like basically free. You'll find sellers in Chardock selling these for some nominal amount of platinum. They're the highest HP ears in the game for warriors, and just amazing to scoop up. Highly, highly, highly recommend them. Essence Pearl from the Essence quest line from Sleeper's Tomb, and then this Vulag earring, also amazing to get. They're obviously way more pricey, but definitely good to obtain. In terms of fingers, Ring 10 is very cheap to obtain in our guild. We do tons of Ring Wars. The quest line's a little annoying, takes time, a little bit of competition, bottlenecks in a couple spots, but this is great to use even when you're like fully BIS. Like for example, I use Christasia's ring for Vulag, and then AOW ring. I still have a Ring 10 in my inventory, and the clicky on it is amazing. So if you're really trying to BIS out your character, you will need all three. But using this and equipping it for the 100 HP, these all have 100 HP, is amazing. In terms of neck, CT neck is amazing. I had it for a very long time. It's also usable in different slots like waist, so you can use it as a belt, and that has 100 HP on it. Voltron's as BIS, very expensive. In terms of helmet, AOW helmet is probably used by the majority of our warriors. It has 100 HP, ton of AC, good stats. Personally, I like KT Crown a little better, just because it also has 100 HP, but also it has 25 magic resist on it. So with this item, I'm able to fully max out my magic resist, self-buffed. In terms of face, Mask of Sky is really, really good from Ishin. It's my first raid item that I've ever gotten in Velius. Used it for a very long time. Akira's Mask of Warfare is BIS for warriors. This was the last slot that I upgraded to fully BIS my character out, but this is like incredibly expensive. You're competing with a lot of people to get this mask. Man, okay, this is probably going to take a long time. I'll just kind of breeze through the rest of them. So chest plate, Vindy breastplate is like 1 DKP. It's very, very cheap. It's 100 HP. It has Aura Battle passive on it. It's amazing. I use it on my character 99% of the time. Statue breastplate, also very good stats. But I really only use this for like tank and spank fights, because you lose Aura Battle with Vindy breastplate. So Vindy breastplate is really the way to go. In terms of arms, Spirit Rack Cord Quest is annoying, but definitely great to get. Yeah, I'm just going to be blasting through these. So back items, there's items on here. Cloak of Thorns has an instant clicky on it, amazing. Tuner Belt has an instant clicky on it, amazing as well. Shoulders, there's some item, there's 100 HP options here. Wrist items, several options. Silver Bracelet of Speed is very expensive, but it has 41% haste on it, plus 100 HP. That's pretty much what all like BIS and advanced warriors are using as their source of haste, along with their max HP. Going into the legs, hot debate. Koi legs versus Dagaran legs. I personally like Koi legs better just because it has more health, and we are prioritizing health. It also has enduring breath, so I don't drown when I'm tanking Koi or being stupid. Dagaran lanes technically probably do have slightly better stats. It has stamina on it, but HP is better on Koi legs, so thus I use Koi legs. In terms of hands, some options there. Onyx gauntlets are pretty relatively expensive, not quite as Vulak, but has 100 HP and is great. Boots of the Storm, droppable. You can buy it with Plaid if you're super rich. Primary and secondary items. Okay, I should have thought about this beforehand. Lots of items here. When I think about weapons, I think of them in terms of there's three major factors that I think about in terms of like, is weapon good for tanking or not? There's three factors that are at play here. One is the delay of the weapon. How fast does it swing? So the faster you swing, the more white damage aggro you generate. Nevhorn is the fastest weapon on this list. It's secondary only, but it is super, super, super fast and has the highest aggro generation of these weapons because of how quick it is in the offhand. What else? The second function is the proc. So some of these procs are better than others, like Blade of Strategy, Red Blade, for example, has the highest aggro proc. And after Warrior aggro proc nerf, some weapons have been really downgraded. Unfortunately, like Infestation isn't nearly as good as it used to be. But Blade of Strategy is still amazing. Like a Kreezen Flame the proc isn't that great, but the higher aggro the proc, obviously the better it's going to generate aggro. And then the second function is health. So some of these, I think most of these have health on them, and some are slightly better than others. Maybe they don't generate as much aggro, so you sacrifice a little bit of aggro generation, but you're using that item to get more health. So for example, in my character, I use Jalen's. In my offhand, the proc on this is like basically negligible. It's like a little like 80 HP life tap, which doesn't really generate any aggro really whatsoever, but it has 100 health on it. And this is what I use my offhand just as more of like a stat stick. It's also very quick too, so it generates good white damage aggro, but you could probably exchange it for one of these for a slightly better aggro, but I like the health. I'd say the biggest combination of weapons that you probably see are Blade of Strategy, along with a Will Sapper, is a very, very common, popular tank weapon combo. Another one is Blade of Strategy and Trident from Koi, also a really popular combo. On my character, I use Assad plus Jalen. So if you're fortunate enough to clutch on one of these, or get like Will Sapper and Trident are amazing. Red Blade is also amazing. You could probably get by with putting a Jalen's in your offhand. So lots of combinations. Just play around with them, see what works best for you. But you really can't go wrong with Red Blade and Will Sapper, or Red Blade and Trident. Range item. So Brain of Khazad-dûl is what I use. It's BIS, I think. The downside of that is that the 30 charisma does hurt. Warbow Ralisek also has 100 HP on it. It's also a massive quality of life boost just because you don't have to keep flip-flopping between your bow if you're trying to like set ramp or pull stuff in, or FTE stuff, like you have to swap it out with a different bow. Like you already have a 100 HP bow permanently equipped on your character. So both of these are incredible options. And Warbow isn't really too expensive. Okay, that was a lot. Probably shouldn't have read all that, but here we are. Part 2 buffs. So as a warrior, it is very important to be fully buffed at all times. Being fully buffed at a raid is just about as important as being at the raid. You have to be buffed at all times. You essentially need to develop like a maniacal obsession with ensuring that you have all the buffs. Following wipes, so I'm sure you know what wipes are, but wipes is like when our entire guild dies, and we have to kind of reset. But following wipes, you should ask yourself, like, do you need to get rezzed and buffed ASAP? The answer is yes, you absolutely do. Especially if you're tanking, you need to like basically have like priority. If you're expected to tank the mob, you having resurrection sickness and not being fully buffed could be the rate limiting step to getting back up and ready for round 2. Being out of stamina can also prevent you from being able to use your disc, so watch out for that. And then a question you could ask yourself too, we're currently in this era of P99 where it's like these weird like claim. So like it's not quite as competitive as the server has been, but hopefully when we get out of this meta and we change to something that's more that's less nonsensical, and becomes more competitive, like one of the questions that we can ask is, do you really need to take that res box right now? Taking a res box and having that res sickness, and having no stamina and having all these issues could hinder our ability to jump right in. So something that I'll sometimes do is if I'm in TOV and we wipe, I'll just jump right in, get my corpse summoned, and loot my gear, leave like an arrow or leave like an item, or use the loot bug to leave your corpse there so you can get it rezzed later. But I will loot all my gear and then get buffs, and I don't have res sickness because I didn't get a res. And then I'll tank the next fight, and then when the fight's over, then I'll worry about getting a res and figuring all that out later. I have, res effects is bad. And being buffed as a warrior is pretty much as important as wearing your gear. Think about how much health your buffs give you. And if you're not fully buffed, imagine you're jumping into a fight with like half of your gear on. You would never do that. So, don't jump into a fight with missing a bunch of buffs. Looking specifically at buffs and what's generally recommended or required as a warrior to have while tanking. So looking at clerics, from clerics you need to receive an Aegolism, which is a huge HP buff that you basically need to have for every single encounter when you're tanking, regardless if you're the main tank or not. There's a lot of fights that happen, like let's say, for example, KT fight or something in TOV, and the warrior's tanking, and then he's just asking in voice like, oh, I need to get an Aegolism, I need to get a haste, and you should, as a warrior, you should probably be prepared and have these buffs ahead of time. And they last a very, very, very long time. I didn't put the duration on here, but most of these buffs last for a very long time. So it doesn't make sense for you to log off for the night with no buffs. If there's, after a raid, like try to get all the buffs to refresh everything and log off. That way you're ready for when something pops and you log back on, you'll have buffs. So Aegolism is a required buff. For these situational buffs, this is going to be a long video, so I'm not going to go through these, but I'll talk about them if they're important. But Aegolism from clerics, you need it. From shamans, you need to get a Focus of Spirit or an FOS. This is a huge health buff that will stack with Aegolism and also give you a massive dex. This should probably cap almost everyone's dex at 255 with proper gear. Also required for 100% of the encounters. If you're not stamina capped, also getting a riotous health, or people just call it stamina or stam, from a shaman will increase your stamina by 50. Most warriors who are properly geared will probably be stamina capped, and that's pretty much regardless of what race you picked at the beginning. But if you are not stamina capped, then get this. Very important. 1 stamina equals 6 health for a warrior, so make sure you're capped. Moving on to other classes. So Enchanter, this is incredibly important. Get a haste. So Vogue or Visions of Grandeur is I was going to say 60% haste, but I guess it's 58% haste. It also has some really nice bonuses to it that'll increase your Threat generation as well. Lasts a fairly long time. This is required. Please do not tank without haste. Paladin, if you're lucky enough to have a Paladin on the raid, get a Divine Strength that stacks with pretty much everything else and gives you 200 health. I should probably move this over to required. This is a damage shield for magicians. It's frankly pretty embarrassing how many warriors tank in our guild without getting a damage shield. This adds so much damage. And obviously you wouldn't just get one. You have like ring 10 and other things that can stack your and clickies. That can really make you, and bards obviously also, that can make you have an incredibly high damage shield. And with these damage shields, the amount of damage that you contribute with just having a passive little damage shield buff on you amounts to like multiple DPS, like the amount of DPS of multiple people. So it's incredible to have. Please try to get a DS. And if there's no mage or if you're unable to get a mage to give you a damage shield, then get a damage shield from a druid. Okay, part 3, clickies. So 2 must-have clickies as a warrior. Fuse and most guilds will have a required list of clickies that are needed by raiders. However, as a warrior, there's a few extra clickies that are generally should be seen as a requirement above what most guilds require. So the first one is this totem, Forlorn Totem of Rolfron Zek. Otherwise, just people just call it totem. This is a 5-charge item, each with 2.5 second cast of this like Holy Might spell. It's gonna undoubtedly get resisted, but it generates a lot of aggro in the process. And at minimum, I would recommend carrying at least 5 of these. Ideally, probably carry more, like 10, just to ensure that you have some on deck and that you're not like being bashful about using them. The cost to recharge these is negligible. It's like 5 platinum, but this is the primary mechanism of how warriors obtain aggro in raids. So please carry many of these. Second item is wart potions or wart pots. These are 10 charge items, each with this instant Calamony buff, which is a 300 HP heal. These are expendable, so just be careful about not using the last charge, otherwise they will poof and result in a bad time. They're a little bit expensive. You can probably find them for like 1.5k or 1.7k in the EC Tunnel, or you can get them at a discount in our guild for the broski price of 2k. So that's, there's that if you need it. These are incredibly helpful in fights where there's AoE damage. We're both like the main tank along with the raid DPS, and that includes warriors that are not tanking. That these fights with AoE damage, like all the DPS is just soaking up AoE damage, and as a DPS person or as a warrior not tanking, you have to heal yourself. Getting low health aggro will override the main tank's aggro, and it's going to flip the mob. And some mobs with it flipping, it's going to result in potentially a wipe. Like if Sevalak flips and kicks the DPS down the ramp, and then a bunch of trash aggroes us and it chains to the clerics, it's going to wipe us. So please don't get low health aggro and don't be bashful about using these. This is a picture of my inventory. It looks a little weird because I use the Russell UI, but I try to keep my inventory organized a certain which way. The reason why I want to show you this is to show you that I carry 9 totems and 9 wart pots. And I use a little system where I put this like little invis ring in this line. So I know that everything left of the invis ring is already expended. So it has no charges on it. And everything to the right is not used yet. So if I've ever in a fight and I need to like grab aggro really quick, or I need to grab a wart potion, I will just, I'll know instantly that anything to the right of this ring is a full charged item. Something to do with these wart pots is something that I've been recommending for a long time now. It's honestly, I think that it's really amazing, highly underused. It's this triple click strategy with wart potions. So these heal 300 HP per click. 3 clicks, that's 900 instant health. You're basically like healing yourself for an entire K worth of health. And you do this 3 times. So 3 times 3 is 9. And you are left with that 1 charge to not make this item poof. And then you move on to the next wart potion. And this is incredibly helpful when you're tanking or you just need to heal yourself very quickly. When I'm tanking, I do not have time to right click and see how many charges are left on the item. I just have to blast through charges. And using this triple click strategy really helps me not accidentally fully drink one of these, but also makes it to where I can heal myself very quickly without concern of like using up one of these. All right, so that was must-haves, and now we are moving over to should-haves. So items that are pretty useful for warriors that we should be carrying. It's not the end of the world if we don't, but we should be carrying is, first items is Shiny Brass Idol, or DA Idol. This is a single cast instant click from inventory, which grants the user invulnerability for up to 18 seconds. When you're invulnerable, you can't perform any actions while doing this, so things like using a disc, Runyon, don't work when you're invulnerable, so don't do that. DA idols are lore, so you can really only carry one, and these are primarily used by our guild, by pollers who have to like train through mobs or require to survive for that portion of the poll. The relevance to warriors with DA idols is that it's useful to be used as part of the initial FTE in some encounters, so like things like Zlandikar, where you're the ramp tank. It's really great to just, pop on the DA, jump, get aggro, and then position while not taking any damage. Or if it's like a competitive situation, we're jumping into like a triples or doubles engage. These are pretty nice to use. Reaper of the Dead. So this is a single click, instant, complete heal. And these are honestly amazing to use on yourself during tanking if death is imminent. Or you can also target other people and CH other people. So if you're not the main tank, you could also spot the tank with this and potentially give them a CH at a dire moment. The downside to this is that they're non-rechargeable anymore, and they are also a little pricey. So the guild does have a Reaper Mule that could replenish these, but just be cognizant of using them really when you absolutely need to. But these could be a game changer for low man engages or for stressful situations. Bark Potions. This is a single click, single cast, instant click root, which will root yourself. It's a self root. And these are good for just a few encounters like Zlandikar or Khazad-dûl or Sontalak. The utility of these is that when it roots you and you are fighting something that will fear, like cast an AoE fear or single target fear, you stay rooted to the ground. And if you are within range of the boss, you'll continue to take damage even through the entire duration of your fear. So this is really great because you're designated the warrior and you can continue to tank instead of it ping-ponging around and attacking random DPS and killing them. You're really not expected to kind of carry these or carry even many of these, but there's some encounters, like if it's something that's going to be at like Zlandikar or Sontalak or something, we'll sometimes have a guild bot at that encounter to just hand off some bark potions. Sometimes people carry these bark potions and can give them to you if you're designated the warrior. If you have extra bag space, carrying a few of these will be much appreciated. For example, when we do recharges, I'll just run myself over to the vendor that sells these, and I'll just load up my entire bags, my empty slots with bark potions. Scepter, this is one of the only remaining instant click aggro items in the game. It has a 10 charge. Instant click generates an aggro per click. The downside to this is that these are not rechargeable. They're a little pricey to pay out of pocket for, but honestly, the upside is that these can kind of be used in like those oh shit moments. When you're tanking like a Lord Viam or an AOW and it flips on the raid, or if you're having trouble getting aggro during a tank swap, these are really, really great because you can blast like 3 to 5 charges or even 10 charges on these to essentially instantly obtain aggro at your command. So use them wisely. They're really not in as high supply as we used to have, RIP McDeer, but they're still around. They're incredibly useful to use, so please carry one if you can. Shrink potions, so 10 dose ants potion. These are great to use in indoor zones, so places like TOV and Kale primarily, just to make yourself small. So as a giant race, such as like an ogre or a troll, these are helpful to not clog up camp spots or koth spots with your giant bodies. One single click should do it. It'll shrink your character and make it easier to kind of pack in. You could do double clickies, double clicks if needed, but you really it's probably unnecessary. These are expendable, so obviously don't use the last charge. An alternative to this is just befriend a shaman, get a shrink from the shaman for free. Or if you're a non-Ixar, you can use a Cobalt Bracer to shrink yourself, though I don't think I've seen many of those being sold lately, and they're also very pricey. Last item on here are these palm flowers. There's 5 different flowers here, each for a different resist. Each of these vary in like different rarity and different cost, and they all cast like a specific 50 plus to a resist. There are some that stack with existing buffs, so like white flower, for example, will stack with other cold resist items. However, like the blue flower, for example, won't. But these are incredibly great quality of life items that can essentially max out any of your resists with really great gear. For example, with the blue flower, I can get 255 magic resist with self buffs, and it's great for those that don't want to have to bother someone for like a GRM or something, and that are approaching a fight that requires that specific resist. You can sort of just max yourself out with flowers, and it's really great. Instant junk buff clicks. These are very important to have, and honestly, they should be viewed as mandatory items. This is a list of some of them. You don't need all of them, but at least having like 2 of these is useful to load up your buff window. Some of these you'll probably just obtain by like gearing up your character, but try your best to have 2 of these. So the concept here is that you use it to load up your junk buff or load junk buffs to protect your more precious buffs like haste and HP. So when you're fighting things that will dispel, like for example, like LTK or Gosrim, when it dispels, it's going to take the first or second junk buff slot from you. And since all of these items are instant click, you can just click them back on in anticipation for the next dispel. So this is sort of a non-all-inclusive list of some junk buffs that are common among warriors. The importance of these junk buffs really can't be overstated. Raids wipe when they engage things like a target like Dozakar, and it's not until like 60 seconds into the fight that the warrior realizes that the Aegolism that they had and the Vogue that they had were dispelled. And if they would have just kept up 1 or 2 junk buffs at the top of their buff list, then their HP buffs would have been protected. And this strategy is called bearing your buffs, just to help keep your junks at the top, keep your valuable buffs at the bottom, and then the dispels are taking away your junks and you just replace them after each dispel cast. If you do ever find that your valuable buffs at the top or at the top of your buff list, like before the engage happens, just click them off, then replace them with junk buffs, and then just ask to get rebuffed. So this is a screenshot of myself. There was no one else in the zone to like load me up on buffs, but this is sort of like to demonstrate what I'm talking about here. 2 instant clicks. So this Thorny Shield and Spike Coat are from my belt and my cloak. These are my 2 junk buffs that I typically use in a fight. And you can see that these are at the top of my buff list. And then my more precious buffs are further down. And if I'm fighting a dispelling mob and it dispels me, it's going to take these junk buffs up here, and I'll just replace it as soon as it does. And these are buried sufficiently down far enough to where it's protected from AoEs. All right, this is taking a lot longer than I thought, but I'll try to go through this part relatively quickly. But these are 6 questions to ask ourselves. So like the who, what, when, why, where, why, how of tanking. You can take a minute to absorb this section, please, but do what you can to learn here. Try your hand at some tanking, at smaller stuff, and work up yourself to work yourself up to build some confidence in yourself. But this will kind of go over like the main bread and butter of tanking for us. So the first question that we have is who is supposed to tank the mob, who's supposed to be the main tank, and the who's obviously you as a warrior, right? You need to be able to tank at a moment's notice and be alert, listening to voice comms and also checking guild chat just to make sure that to see if you've been added to the main tank list. And unfortunately, as a warrior who potentially could get added to the list, you really can't take any like sneaky AFK breaks unless you tell a responsible person who's keeping an eye out on that tank list. And generally, that's the person who's like managing the tank list, and let them know that you're going AFK and throw up your AFK tag for good measure as well. Obviously, don't do this when an engage is imminent or when you know that you're coming up soon on the main tank list. Who is supposed to maintain that tank list that we were talking about? So during a raid, there's usually a point person that will take care of that list, and that is usually a warrior. And if it's not a warrior, sometimes someone will take over. But if you are a warrior on the raid and there is no tank list, then please, for the love of God, just take over the tank list and help keep us coordinated and organized. This is usually done both in voice comms along in guild, but guild is the required mechanism for communicating the tank list. This is usually like the same people over and over that take ownership of this role, but they're not always present. So please, if you don't see the tank list being created, then please take it over. The general concept of maintaining a tank list is pretty simple. So this is sort of the strategy I use to making a tank list. I'll do a who guild warrior. I have this as a macro just to see who's around and use whoever populates within that who guild warrior to throw into a tank list. Be cognizant of what type of boss you're about to encounter. And if this is like a low number fight, or let's say we're fighting something that hits particularly pretty hard, then perhaps put in like a more seasoned warrior or at least someone who has like more health at the front of the list. But if it's for like a less stressful target or like, or it doesn't hit quite as hard or something, then like just feel free to organize the tank list however you want. Just be careful to not like monopolize the tanking or to dump like the same trusty warrior in that tank list that always tanks. Like spread the love, let everyone get a chance to tank, and that'll help generate experience. But just be careful not to put like tanks in there that have never tanked anything. A couple of months ago, there was someone who threw in a warrior that's never tanked like really anything, that was first to tank Vayem, and that poor warrior was like, didn't know the positioning, didn't have the best gear, was getting like flung all around, was ranging heals. It was a mess. I don't even think they dissed. Maybe they did, or maybe like their HP was spiking like crazy. But just be cognizant of like what we're tanking. Ask questions or see how other warriors manage the tank list. But that's the first step. Just figure out what warriors are in zone. One thing that I like to do is to make a quick like /target or /tar space their name, just to make sure that the warrior that you're putting in that tank list, like especially the one that's next on the tank list, is actually at the raid and not like AFK somewhere in the zone. There's been like examples, for example, like where we've like caught the trips for something like Sevalak or Sekinar or something, and the second tank in that list is AFK at the entrance with no buffs. This extra step, this /tar, can make it to where you can confirm that they're actually with the raid, and it's just a good habit to make sure that all the warriors in your list are actually present and ready to tank. Also, I'm sure that if this was you that was AFK at the zone, like if you forgot to log off for the night, then you would love for this to be reciprocated, and not potentially lead to some bad stuff happening. Another thing that I like to do is to have like a target macro, is to just alert the next tank that they're tanking next, just to not catch anyone off guard and to make sure that we're all ready. Last part of this is who's supposed to be the ramp tank. And it's this overall concept of ramp tank, and people abbreviate this ramp or RT or FRT for fuse ramp tank. But when a target rampages, not every single mob in this game rampages, but there's some that do, that means that the mob will on chance attack the very first raider who received aggro from the raid target, as long as they're within range. Ramp can only be on one person at a time. It does not follow line of sight rules, so you could be like around the corner, but as long as you're within range, it'll still ramp you. It's something that we do with mobs like Zlandikar. One exception to this is if you were the first one to attack the target, and you were also the main tank, then the rampage designation moves to the very next person in the aggro order. Exception is when the ramp tank moves out of melee range, then the next person down will get aggro. So it's a little complex, and I'll explain this in a quick animation that took me an embarrassingly long amount of time to make. So let's say that Vindy pops and Scales pulls Vindy into camp. While Vindy is coming into camp, so he's approaching grass, we have this random warrior here who is designated the ramp tank. He shoots an arrow into Vindy. And we have up here aggro order, and this shows the order that someone got on Vindy's aggro table. This doesn't tell you who's at the top of the list in terms of like who has the most aggro right now, because it'd actually be flip-flopped if Scales got like body aggro or something. But this is just the order that someone got on his aggro table. So Scales was the first to FTE, so he's number 1, and Frenzy was the next person to do anything to Vindy, which was shoot an arrow. Let's say in this fight, Nathan is designated the main tank, Frenzy is designated the ramp tank, and while Vindy's coming into camp, Nathan puts in a totem. So he gets 3rd on his aggro order. Scales brings it into camp and zones out. So he's in camp, and now everyone is... The DPS come in, and we're fighting the mob. So aggro order at this point was Scales originally. He's zoned out, so he's off the aggro order completely. So the first person on Vindy's aggro order is Frenzy. The second person on here will be Nathan, and then all the other DPS. And even though Nathan's designated the main tank, I should have probably had Vindy facing Nathan, but Nathan is tanking Vindy, and Frenzy's just taking rampage damage, which is that percentage chance that Vindy just swings out and does a round of attacks on the person designated ramp tank. Let's say that this is Vindy's aggro radius, or his attack radius. So anyone within this can actually attack Vindy. And since Frenzy's staying within this attack radius, he's still designated the tank. But if there were ever a time that Frenzy steps out of the attack radius, he now loses the rampage designation, and it would move to the next person down. So the next person down is Nathan, but Nathan's currently tanking Vindy, and as we said on the previous slide, the main tank cannot be rampage tank. It's one of the mechanics of the game. It's impossible for it to happen. So since Nathan's tanking, rampage then moves now down to the next person, which should, in our example, just be a bunch of random DPS. So some random person that's DPSing will get rampage status and will start taking rampage damage. And if Frenzy ever steps back into range, this is sort of a quirky mechanic of rampage, he will regain the rampage designation. He didn't zone out, he just stepped out of range and he came right back in, and he regains rampage tank. Okay, question number... This is 2. What? So what things do I have to tank? Not every target in this game requires a warrior. There's some situations where a knight tank is actually preferred, such as like a paladin or a shadow knight, and they'd be better over a warrior. And this is generally for fights that require like very quick snap aggro. So there's like things in like Vishan's Peak or TOV trash mobs, or mobs that like don't hit too hard. Knights are actually better than warriors in this context, and that's because of their snap aggro. Warriors do not have channeling skills, and unfortunately we don't have instant click aggro weapons, so puppet strings and root nets and mallets, those are all gone, and the primary mechanism was that totem that I showed you earlier that takes 2.5 seconds to cast. Since we don't have channeling skill, we'll get interrupted, and disciplines have a cooldown, so like some of these targets, knights are just better. But for boss mobs, warriors, as long as Pop Azul is not around, warriors are the de facto tank for boss mobs. Be cognizant of what mob you're supposed to tank. Knowing the specific mob may also help you understand if there's any special rules, for example, stacking junk buffs like we just talked about, or maybe like some weird positioning, like there's certain mobs in the game that you have to have very unique positioning, and the positioning's unique to just that one fight alone. Like you never do the same setup like we do with Tunair for any other fight. But knowing like what mob we're doing that for will help you be prepared and aware of how to position the mob. What do I do if I lose aggro on the mob but I'm not tanking? This is sort of like a source of debate where let's say you're the main tank and the DPS is just outpacing you and you keep losing aggro. What do you do when you lose aggro? Two options here. One option is just keep attacking. You know, if someone out aggroed you, hopefully they can feign or evade, or they'll just die and you'll get aggro after they die. And it just keeps things a little simple. Option two, which is the option that I prefer, is to use a totem. It obviously takes a little bit of time to cast that totem. But personally, I like that burst aggro. And then as you're casting, your weapon swing timer also resets too, or like doesn't reset, but it's ticking for that 2.5 seconds. So generally when your totem click goes off, you will also just like swing all your weapons at the same time. So you do lose out a tiny bit on white damage aggro, but you make up for it with the burst aggro of the totem. Something important that when you're doing this strategy is just to be active. If the mob does turn back to you while you're casting, don't just sit there and wait for the 2.5 seconds to finish up. Duck that spell and start attacking again, just to not lose out on that aggro generation. I see a lot of warriors do that, and unfortunately that makes option number two less like worse than option one. So be active, and this option is probably better, at least in my opinion, if you're doing things properly. All right. Question 3, when am I supposed to get aggro? So the when pertains to when you should jump in there and use your totem and start taking damage from the raid target. Equally important to all of this is to when not to get aggro. So obviously when you're not the tank, you're not supposed to be getting aggro, right? But also do not get aggro when the CH chain is not even landing on you. And there's some difficult engages out there, and high stress situations. But in these scenarios, just try not to get too ahead of yourself, and click that totem proc into like Vulak or something when the first speed bump hasn't even gone yet. The CH chain hasn't even started landing on you. It happens a lot, honestly, especially with like warriors that haven't tanked in a long time, or like newer warriors who just don't have a lot of like experience under their belt. The CH chain isn't even landing on you, so you grab the target's aggro and then you just die because there's no way that CH is landing on you. So a program such as like Gina, Vatrelec would love for you to download Gina and the Fuse Gina package that shows the CH chain, and it's very, very, very easy to see when a CH is going to land on you and when it would be appropriate for you to obtain aggro. So that's one great option for you to make sure that you don't embarrass yourself. It's fine if it happens, but it's a learning opportunity, so try not to have it happen again. Voice comms, also important. You could wait until you're called in within voice comms. This is something that you could sometimes rely on. It doesn't get verbally stated 100% of the time or anything like that, but if you're in voice comms and you need assistance with knowing when to jump in, usually we'll tell you in voice comms that like, okay, the bump is going down, warrior, you can grab aggro, or main tank, you can grab aggro now. So that's all of these things will help you know when to not get aggro and when to get aggro. Question 4 is where. So the where pertains to where you should be tanking the mob, more specifically like the positioning to where to tank the mob at. There's like several primary concepts here that sometimes get overlooked. And there's very unique situations set up here. So one situation with positioning, there's obviously a lot of different setups for positioning, but one that is very big and constantly gets screwed up is the positioning with Glimmer or Shimmer mobs within North TOV. This is a mob that will AoE dispel. This mob requires pinning, so my amazing animation skills. Imagine this line right here is just the wall. The tank is right here. The glimmer, this looks disgusting, but this is the best that I could do for a glimmer. The tank is tanking on a wall, and the DPS are attacking the wall, and this is sort of like the basic setup of a pin, where the DPS attacks, and it like each swing and each hit kind of like minutely pushes the mob in a certain direction. But if they're locked up against this wall, they're kind of like right on this wall right here, the DPS is just pushing it to the wall, so it's not like moving around. So the tank takes the dragon, DPS pushes it into this area, and then generally the clerics are like behind the tank casting CH on the tank. Unique for Glimmer and Shimmer Drakes in North TOV, though, is that they dispel, so you actually want to stay on the like rim of their attack radius. So DPS is right on the edge right here, the tank is right on the edge right here. Unique to these glimmers and shimmers is an area of effect dispel. So it doesn't dispel around the dragon, it dispels around the tank. So it's important for the tank to be at max range in order to still attack the dragon, but be far enough from the DPS. So when that AoE does go off, which is this red circle here, it's not hitting the DPS and dispelling their haste and all their buffs. It's not hitting the clerics and dispelling like their gobs and their clarities or anything else. Really, the only person in this scenario that's getting dispelled is the tank. And just be careful, because if you get too close to this dragon or to this drake, this red line is going to overlap with DPS, and you're going to start dispelling DPS. If you get too far away and you get outside of aggro radius of this glimmer or shimmer, this might move up to you, but in most scenarios it actually probably summon you back to the middle. And then when you get summoned to the middle, this dispel overlap is going to be over the DPS, and you're just going to dispel all the DPS, and that slows raids down to a screeching halt when that happens. So this is just one example. There's more examples out here, but this is probably one that's important to know, both as a tank or as DPS. Just understand this mechanic. Position yourself in a manner to not range heals. So the majority of raid targets in this game require a CH chain or a complete heal chain rolling on you. It's a 10-second cast, but it's only 150 range, which means that you have to be relatively close to the clerics to be a recipient of this heal. And as the fight goes on, sometimes the target gets pushed around, so just be cognizant of how far you are away from the clerics, and whether you need to reposition yourself in a manner to get those heals. So for like this example, let's say the DPS, there's people behind it and it's like moving this way, or maybe it's moving that way. Just the clerics are over here, and the further and further away as a tank that you get from the clerics, be careful not to range those heals, because you'll die, and then these will flop around, and then it'll, bad stuff ensues. Be cognizant of AoE spells. So this was one example of an AoE spell. There's some AoE spells that cast around the dragon, so there's some unique positioning. There's also some mobs that cast like a cone proc in front of themselves, like Veneral Sather or Dracolich, that require you to face the target away from the raid at all times. And obviously there's other examples of unique positioning, but the important thing here is just to pay attention, ask questions, and listen to instructions over voice comms. Last bullet on here is don't get backstabbed. Some mobs that you need to like pin on the wall or park into like a corner or something. Some mobs do backstab. So for example, mobs like a Katiar or Koi, just be careful that you're not getting, like, you're positioning yourself properly. For someone like a Katiar, don't get pushed up against the wall where the mob like flips and hits you with a backstab or some double backies, and that will delete your warrior. That will just completely kill you if that happens. And then the mob is loose and it's killing DPS. So be careful and mindful what mobs backstab, and try not to get backstabbed. Question 5, why? Why should I not just be a DPS specialist? This may be personal. I imagine probably a lot of people share this sentiment, but classes within EverQuest are more fun when you play them how they were designed. And warriors were designed to be tanks. So being a 60 warrior within the raid, playing it to its fullest, requires you to jump in the tank rotation and to understand tank mechanics. Why do warriors need to tank raid targets? This seems like a pretty obvious answer, but maybe it's not like really super obvious to everyone. Warriors have the most amount of health in this game, and this is secondary to the high HP gear that we can obtain, along with the highest stamina to HP modifier. Additionally, we have two very, very useful disciplines that allow us to either reduce incoming damage or have a chance to even avoid incoming damage altogether. These have very short cooldowns, 10 minutes for defensive, 7 minutes for evasive, which means that we can use these very frequently and survive hard-hitting fights. And each of these discs lasts for 3 minutes each. So when you think about evasive, lasts 3 minutes and it's 7-minute cooldown. So by the time that this fades, you only have 4 minutes left before you can use it again. So if you're soloing or doing small group content, man, there's like almost no reason to just be popping evasive every single time it's up. It's incredible. What else do I have here? One of the common questions that I get is, does this boss mob require defensive or evasive? And I've broken this down into like the simple answer and the complex answer. The simple answer for this question is pretty much just use defensive. This is like the simplistic, no real thinking involved way of figuring this answer out. There are some few mobs in this game that defensive probably wouldn't be the best. So like that includes things like random mobs within Plane of Growth, with the exception of Tunair, that require evasive instead of defensive. Just defensive doesn't work in that zone for some reason. There's some other mobs that like proc, so like Veneral Sath or Dracolich or Sandslag require evasive, but for the vast majority of all other targets within this game, defensive is honestly the way to go. Difficult answer or complex answer is, it kind of really depends. I've heard so many numbers get thrown out over the years, but generally if a target hits for like 600 health or more per hit, then you should probably just use defensive, honestly. Obviously this doesn't take into account like quad or flurry mobs, but this does include, this does apply to every single hit. So there's a certain concept I want to go into a little bit more depth on. Evasive means that the target either hits or misses you. That sounded dumb to say, but this gives you a random 25% chance for the enemy to miss you, and thus you take 0% damage for that swing that they missed. But you also still have a chance to take 100% of max hit damage. So this is definitely great to decrease overall damage, but the mob still has the potential to just delete you in one single round. So like, for example, if you fought AOW without defensive, you can have all the HP in the world and AOW still has a chance to just kill you in one single round of attacks with evasive. So a lot of fights, evasive is really not the way to go. For defensive, this means that the mob will always do 35% less damage, regardless if it hits you or misses you. It just applies a blanket 35% less damage to you. So choosing defensive is sort of like the more stable choice. It doesn't really leave your survival up to chance here, as all the hits will have defensive applied versus this like random 25% RNGesus reliance that you're going to have with evasive. So this prevents the weird like HP spiking that like if you're just so happen to take all those hits, or if you're just dodging things left and right with evasive, that's great, but your HP stagnant and then clerics start ducking their heals to try to preserve mana, and then someone doesn't have the best reaction time, they duck their heal, and then you take a bunch of hits. And defensive is honestly just the way to go in nearly every single fight. So use defensive. Part 6 is how. So how am I supposed to tank? Most of it's fortunately very automatic, but at the initial start of the engage, you have to be pretty active. So first off, make sure you have the right weapons equipped. It's ridiculous how many times I have to send tells to the person tanking to like take their blue blade off or take off their like avatar two-hander weapon and put on aggro weapons. Just so step 1, make sure you have the right weapons equipped before the fight starts, ideally. Step 2, use the correct discipline. This sounds sort of like a no-brainer, but in the heat of the moment, there's a lot of warriors that forget to use their defensive. And then when they go splat, there's undoubtedly going to be that one person that looks into their logs and finds that you took max rounds, and has no chill, and will post it in Discord, to help understand why we why we wiped. So please use your disc before the fight begins. Please use burst aggro, meaning use a totem click to get aggro. Don't just passively get aggro with just turning on auto attack. That's not the ideal way to do that. So for example, like let's say that we get coughed up to Aerie in North TOV, and bump goes in, and it's your turn to get aggro. Don't just passively turn on auto attack when people call it, when the CH chain is landing on you, when people in Discord voice say that you can jump in there and get aggro now. Don't just passively turn on auto attack and generate like slow aggro. You want to click a totem and then turn on auto attack. That allows DPS to go in a lot more soon. Talking about auto attack, use auto attack. Auto attack is your primary mechanism for generating aggro outside of that initial totem click, and that will make sure that you maintain aggro throughout the entire fight. There's some fights like AOW, for example, that AOW gets pulled into camp and we unload a bunch of like totems or like drop an entire 10 charge scepter into AOW. And please don't be that person that doesn't realize until 60 seconds into the fight, when they lose their aggro and it starts killing all the DPS, that you didn't even have auto attack on this entire time. Sometimes you turn on auto attack and then you get pushed into a corner, and maybe your character crouches and then your auto attack gets turned off with the crouch. Just please be aware and watch your character model. Look at your chat, see if you're actually attacking. Gina is also relatively helpful here, but not absolutely needed. And if you ever notice this happening, it is going to be incredibly challenging to catch up with the DPS and outpace. And if the DPS is dying left and right because you can't catch up to them, we probably won't have the gas to kill the mob. So please don't let this happen. Position the mob correctly. We sort of beaten this one in pretty hard, but this is like the initial phase, like the first 10 or like even like 15 seconds of the mob. You need to make sure all this stuff is happening. And fortunately, the rest is pretty automatic after that. You just make sure your auto attack's on, make sure you have the right weapons on, make sure you're positioned correctly, and it's just like literally kick your feet up, and it's relatively easy from there. But if you do lose aggro during the fight, it happens. It's helpful to be quick with another totem click, or we kind of talked about this earlier. Make sure that you're just doing what you can to make sure that you can regain aggro. Another important how is how do I control aggro when I'm not the main tank? You want to avoid dying prematurely, so knowing when to control your aggro generation is actually quite important here, especially when you're listed as a tank further down on the list. It's really not a great look to be the second tank and be like super ambitious with your like amazing warrior DPS to where you steal the target's aggro from the tank and then just get yourself killed. In this scenario, just pace yourself. At minimum, use non-proccing weapons or weapons that just don't have like the highest threat generating procs. Personally, here I like to use two-handers, so I have a Palladius that I use when I'm just DPSing. Just because it doesn't generally generate like as much aggro as two one-handed weapons. And if the tank goes down and I'm next on the list or I'm further down, I need to jump in and be the tank. Using a two-hander doesn't really set you too far back from the DPS. So with a couple clicks here and there and swapping to better weapons, you could generally get aggro. But just pace yourself. Make sure you don't go too crazy. Remember, you do 0 DPS when your character dies. So try not to do that. And how do I not embarrass myself? A lot of the stuff that we just talked about, but please ask questions, get some practice in, see what the warriors are doing, or watch the warrior fail horribly and learn what not to do. But yeah, if you see a tank list getting thrown together and you want practice tanking, just message the person putting together the list and get some reps in and get some more confidence and practice. Part 5, be vocal. So be in Discord voice. The vast majority of raid instructions gets communicated via voice. And if you're not in voice, you're going to be kind of left in the dark a little bit. And I know that there's like some places that you're not able to join Discord, or sometimes you're semi-distracted and you're at work, or you're on a conference call or something, you're just not able to join voice. Try not to make like make that be like a common occurrence. Like here and there, I get it, but if you're a warrior within a raid, you have the potential to miss out on some very important instructions that's going to impact like the raid being able to progress forward because you as a tank don't even hear the instructions. So try not to do that if you can. Communicate important stuff. Don't shit up comms. Don't turn it into your own personal podcast. Obviously want to communicate important things that are happening. So if your defensive disc is going down, we want to know about that. You're about to take a lot more damage, so that might require us to speed the CH chain up. If your HP is spiking too much, let's say that like the CH chain is just not on point, or your armor is made of warm butter, and we just need to speed things up. That might need to be communicated in voice before you die. If you have a divine intervention or DI and it fires, that's very important. Communicate that in voice. We'll get a cleric to cast another DI on you. Sometimes people in using Gina can detect when your DI fired and will call out in voice. But if you do not hear that happening, please call out that your DI fired so we can get you another one. If you need the DPS to hold off on attacking, say it. If the mob's ping-ponging around and you're doing all that you can to get aggro and you just have like overly ambitious DPS that are grabbing aggro from you, like maybe say it in voice just to help make sure that our DPS aren't dying. This one sucks, but if you lose a vital buff, like if you just started tanking something and then you notice a vital buff like Vogue or Aegolism or something start fading, please voice that in comms. Being polite and like looking to see what enchanter is in zone and sending them like a polite message requesting a Vogue, like that's going to take way too much time, and like you're not going to be able to be active with all the things necessary to tank like while you're typing all that shit out. So please just like say it in voice that you need a buff. It sucks. Try not to do it a lot, but like if it happens, you need to communicate that. Main tank rampage tank list, also very important to communicate. Ideally, these are communicated in guild. Like fully typed out, but when engages are imminent or there's confusion, also for some reason a lot of people like do not read guild chat for some reason. It also gets like spammed away with the CH chain. So if there's any confusion, just voicing who is designated main tank, and if the fight warrants a rampage tank, then just communicating in that voice will help clear up any confusion. All right, to kind of round out the rest of this presentation, I included a couple frequently asked questions that I get. These are questions I've been asked pretty frequently in the past couple of years. One question is, are there any Fuse warrior class leads are there any warrior class leads in Fuse? The answer here is no, but there are a lot of warriors in the guild that would be more than happy to answer your questions. Willing to put together an hour-long presentation for us. So if you ever have questions, please feel free to just ask them out there or send a DM to someone that you trust as a warrior. Another outlet for asking questions is a section within our Discord class pins channel that has class specific information. Every single class has its own little channel in there, there's one specific for warriors. So feel free to ask questions within that warrior channel. There's several warriors that lurk in that channel, chances are is if you have a question about warriors regarding tanking, likely someone else has that question too. So please ask questions. We have a relatively engaged group of people in there, and I'm sure there's plenty of people that are willing to chime in to help answer your questions. How do I get more practice? Let's say that there's so many warriors in this guild. How do I get practice with so many tanks in here? Just ask, honestly, start small. Tanking during like a Halls of Testing raid is a great way to build your confidence with positioning, managing aggro, rampage mechanics, casters, etc. So once you feel a little bit more confident with tanking things like Halls of Testing, you can offer yourself to tank stuff like Vindy. Vindy's honestly like almost like a rite of passage, sort of like a gear check, so to speak. So if you have at least like 5k fully buffed, then you'll stand a chance against this guy with a defensive disc. We've tanked this guy with an enchanter just fine. So even if you are like, one of those beginner warrior categories that we talked about earlier, like you still stand a chance, and it's really a great way to sort of like test yourself. And as you get more and more comfortable with tanking things, you'll be integrated more into the tank lists. So please ask questions. Trying and sometimes even just screwing up is honestly the best way to learn. Question 4, how much aggro do I need to have into the mob before the DPS goes in? It really depends on the target. You'll get sort of a feel for it when to call DPS in when you get more familiar with the encounters and the level of aggro generation with your weapon setup. With that being said, like in a perfect world, a tank should probably have like 5 seconds minimum to maybe even up to 10 seconds of uninterrupted aggro generation before the DPS goes in. This is honestly how we had it in live, like in the live servers before P99. And now that, in P99, we have no patience. So unfortunately, this doesn't always happen. But all we can do is really try our best. If you get a ton of aggro generating procs early on, then it's great to call DPS in if they're holding off. But ideally, we'd probably want 5 seconds or so to generate some aggro. Question 5: I'm the next main tank for the next boss, but my disc is down. What do I do? In this scenario, just be vocal. Tell us in voice comms or guild that your disc is down. Send a tell to the warrior taking care of the main tank list. Really, try not to go into the fight without a defensive disc, because that's way more dangerous than the 10 seconds it takes to swap around the main tank list to just include someone else. This question, should I use a macro? You've seen other classes use macros. Should warriors use macros for anything? My answer to that is you can if you want. Some warriors have a message that they type within guild, or a macro, a hotkey that they use to signify when they proc one of their weapons. In my opinion, I think it's a little unnecessary, but it certainly does help the guild know that you've procced your weapons, and it will help the DPS understand when to go in or when to not to. And that's it. That's the end of our little warrior class guide. Hopefully you've learned something new in this presentation, and hopefully this is a small step towards ushering in a new era of warriors feeling a little bit more confident to jump into the tank list and taking on the various responsibilities needed from warriors within our raids. Anyways, thanks for tuning in, and thanks for trusting me with your time.